bless you. A little bit cooler. Nice day. We're off VBS, aren't we? We had a great week. Thank you, everybody, for all the hard work that you put into that. That was super nice. And it's nice to get back to our normal time up here also. I don't get overly enamored by quotes that people toss out, but every now and then there's a good scriptural idea within a quote, and that does excite me. I like that. And that's this one right here. Sometimes God lets you hit rock bottom so that you will discover that He is the rock at the bottom. I'm sure that's not the first time you've ever heard that one, but it's just something that's always rang true with me. I'm sure you can look back on your life at a time that was probably what you now consider to be rock bottom. I don't care who you are other than the Lord Himself. Everybody in life, somewhere, sometime, has a rock bottom. I would say probably for most of humanity, certainly not all, but probably for most of humanity that comes in maybe the teenage or early adult years. But I've seen a lot of people handle it much more successfully than I did. And they go through the teenage years, the young adults, and then it's 30, 40 that hit rock bottom. I've seen others who do so well, and you think they're going to be the exception. And then 50 or 60, they hit. There have even been occasions when in people's 70s I've seen all the way through, and then all of a sudden, eventually, if you're a human being, you have a pulse, you will have a rock bottom. Yeah, we see that with some of the greatest characters of the Bible. We're studying about the kings, so let's just toss out a couple of those as examples. Let's say David, tremendous man, all through his life until what appears to be about 55, age 55 probably for him. Whew, rock bottom. Solomon, maybe the greatest young man to have ever lived outside of the Lord Himself. And you look about maybe 40, 45, whew. Eventually it comes for everybody, doesn't it? It doesn't matter who you are, eventually you experience rock bottom. Well, we have a tremendous servant of the Lord that we've been discussing, minus VBS week, in Jehoshaphat. He's a king in the south, and I think throughout his life, he's flying high, maybe even ascending, and all of a sudden, he goes down as well. It doesn't mean he's a terrible, rotten person. That doesn't mean David was. That doesn't mean Solomon was. Overall, it's just that eventually as human beings, at some point, we have our struggles. And this guy has this rocky road that he's been experiencing. So what we're going to do is pick up in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, 2 Chronicles 20, and we're discussing the descendants of Jezebel, people in some way that are connected to her. And don't forget, even though she has moved on to her reward, she has left her consequences behind. They're being felt. So 2 Chronicles 20 in the first verse, it happened after this. Since it's been a couple of weeks, it's probably good to remind ourselves, what's this? All right, that's just kind of an ambiguous pronoun there. This, what's been going on? Well, let's rewind, not very far, just chapter 19. It's a short one. We're not going to reread the whole thing. But if you recall, there's been a conflict connected to the Syrians, and this is with Ahab, who is the king in the north. He dies in the skirmish. Jehoshaphat is allowed to escape by the blessing of God, and he returns home. But in verse 4 of 2 Chronicles 19, Jehoshaphat lives in Jerusalem, and he brings back at the end of the verse the people to the Lord God of their fathers. It's religious reform that takes place in his nation. And not just on a religious, but also a political and a societal level. Verse number 5, then he set judges in the land throughout all the fortified cities of Judah, city by city, and he says to them, you look out, or take heed to what you are doing, for you are not judging for man, but for the Lord, who is with you in the judgment. So you make sure that the fear of the Lord's on you. Take care and do it, for there is no iniquity with the Lord our God, no partiality, nor taking of bribes. And I appreciate it. It's been a couple weeks, but I appreciate the way that Rebecca left us off in describing this. Is this not a perfect example of the type of judging that the Lord would command of His people? And Matthew, the 7th chapter, actually tells us to do that very thing. Do not judge, though, by appearance, but judge with a righteous judgment. Also in Matthew 7, do not judge hypocritically. Make sure you're doing the right thing yourself before you pass any judgment on others. So this is what he's doing throughout the land. All kinds of pluses, positive reform. So we're going back to our text now, chapter 20. I say all of that because we need to know what this is before we can understand what's taking place here. It happened after this. After what? The religious reform that Jehoshaphat has set into place throughout Judah, the political, the societal reform. He's cleaned up any remnants of mess that were left. That the people of Moab with the people of Ammon and others with them besides the Ammonites came to battle against Jehoshaphat. You know how I like to put a geographical view to things, so let's look at this. We're in the kingdom of Judah in the southwestern corner of the screen. The kingdom of Judah, you have the capital city of Jerusalem with the star in the northern center portion of the province. And we're told two peoples here that are named come against those of Judah. What two people are they that are named? Look back at verse 1 if you need to. Very good. Thank you, Karen. Moab and Ammon. So those due east of them, but across, it's not labeled. What body of water is this? Dead Sea. Very good. Nice, Beth. So just across the Dead Sea, due east of them, the Moabites. And then if you look to the northeast, the Ammonites. These two have aligned to come against the kingdom of Judah. Now we're also told that there are others. Well, that doesn't help us to identify, does it? Maybe the text will give us more indications as we move on. Well, let's just consider that. Who would be some prospects? Oftentimes, it's those closest, neighboring, that are going to come against another. If you'll notice to the south, the Edomites neighbor. To the west, you have the Philistines that neighbor, so it could be either one of those. To the north, you have the Israelites, and there's been civil conflict. Why would you not expect the Israelites right now? Why would that not make sense? What's happened here recently? Jehoshaphat, king of the south. There we go. Yeah, very good, Emily. We have a marriage alliance between these two. They've been chummy now for a little while, so that wouldn't make any sense. Probably not. I mean, things can change, right? Especially in families. You can get some pretty nasty wars there. So, I mean, it's possible, but you wouldn't suspect them. Or you have the Phoenician states up to the south, the northwest. Oh, what about this one? Now we have here Kingdom of Aram, Damascus. What's this people? They're called by something else. We know them better by, and if it helps any, Damascus. Nobody else, I bet Jeff could tell us. There's no pressure there, but I'm just saying, I bet he could. Damascus. He was telling us in one of his VBS lessons, the oldest capital in the world. Syrians, very good. It's still, right? Syria today, the capital of Syria. Oldest standing, that is, capital in the world. Damascus. So it could be the Syrians up to the northeast. It could be the Edomites to the south. Could be the Philistines to the west. It's possible the Israelites to the north, we wouldn't suspect them very much. So let's see if we can identify these others as we go on. This much we do know. The Ammonites so far, the Moabites, and others with them came to battle against Jehoshaphat. Verse 2, then some came and told Jehoshaphat, saying, a great multitude is coming against you from beyond the sea. Now, if you stop right there, in the Bible, the sea of the Bible lands, I know there are a few possibilities here. You have the Sea of Galilee to the north, the Dead Sea to the south. But the sea, you might think, well, how about the one to the west, like the Great Sea or the Mediterranean Sea? But then we're told from Syria. So those are the ones of the kingdom of Aram, Damascus, the oldest standing capital in the world. Damascus, this is the Syrians. So essentially everyone to the east of the Jordan River Valley has aligned to come against Judah and to fight against Jehoshaphat. If you'll recall, Jehoshaphat has a powerful military, and that's saying something that people even want to fight against them. But it also makes sense when it's a tag team effort. The bullies get together, and it's 3-on-1, and they probably think, well, this gives us a chance against his very powerful military. So a few things here. We want to finish up this verse. And they are in Hazazon Tamar, which is En Gedi. And we're going to talk about En Gedi. That's an interesting spot. I hate to admit it to you, but I knew little to nothing about it prior to this Bible class. And I thought that. I'm going through, I thought, well, I wonder what En Gedi is. We've seen it in the Bible before, but I want to know more about it, and I'll tell you more about it here in just a moment. But first, why is this guy experiencing military conflict? We know the Lord and his interaction with the nations, especially his own people, and the blessing that he gives them. And we know that there are long periods of peace and that the Lord is responsible for that, as we're told. So my question to you is this. The guy has just made sweeping religious, societal, and political reforms to the positive in his nation. So why does God allow this wave of attack to come against Jehoshaphat? Why would he do that? You remember the lead-in about rock bottom? Well, it doesn't sound like this guy's hit rock bottom. It sounds like he's flying high spiritually, isn't he? He has one foot on land and one in the moving stream right now. He's having some conflict. He's being pulled two different ways. What's been going on in his life recently? Go back to chapter 18. 2 Chronicles, please. 2 Chronicles 18 in the first 3 verses. Now Jehoshaphat had great riches and honor. Pause. This is the constant ascent of this guy. Remember Solomon? Constant ascent. And what ends up being Solomon's downfall? 3 things. By the way, the very 3 things that God strictly forbade of his kings. But what ends up being Solomon's downfall? It begins where, it seems? Okay? Horses, intermarriage with pagan people, and multiplication of wives in addition to that. And what else? Oh, and the multiplying of money, the exponential wealth. You're exactly right. So this guy, he had great riches. Does that mean he's doing wrong or he's going to fall? No, not necessarily. It's just that we know this. There is a tremendous temptation that comes with an overwhelming blessing that comes from above. We see it in every nation in the history of the world. It's always been that way. And you see it, if not with almost with every person who's ever lived. The more blessing we begin to receive, the more difficult it becomes to handle those blessings the appropriate way. Doesn't mean he's wrong, but he's been exponentially blessed. He had great riches. The second thing, and honor. What's another word for that? Respect. He's used to everyone bowing down before him. He's grown accustomed to everyone, whether of his own country or those on the outside, telling him how great he is. Is that sinful? No. But the more you hear how great you are, and everything you're doing is right, the more you start to believe it. And I think that more temptation it sends his way. And we're told, verse 1 of chapter 18, 2 Chronicles, he made a marriage alliance with Ahab. What do we know about Ahab? I know he's deceased now, but we're rewinding here. What do we know about Ahab? He's the king of Israel. Good, bad? Those aren't the appropriate words. Rotten would be it. I mean, just about rotten to the core. Maybe a glimmer of goodness, which would show God's patience with him for the double deuces for the 22 years of his reign. But yeah, not a tremendous guy, that's for sure. And the fact that he, not just like, it's not like he makes a treaty with him. It's like, hey, let's marry our families together. Really? That's the kind of influence that you want? You have a pagan missionary for a wife that's corrupted your entire family and the whole nation. And you're like, hey, I need that in my family and my nation also. That's a red flag right there. After some years, he went down to Ahab in Samaria, and Ahab killed an abundance of sheep and oxen for him and for the people who were with him, and induced him to go up against Ramoth-Gilead, the east side of the Jordan River. Ahab, king of Israel, said to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, will you go with me to Ramoth-Gilead? He answered him, what do you think? I am as you are. Really? You sure about that? My people as your people. I want my family to be your family. My people to be just like your people. Be careful what you wish for. We will be with you in the war. Now you have this in verse 4. And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, inquire first for the word of the Lord. Well, hang on just a second. He's given him his commitment. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll go with you. Let's talk to God about it first. Well, didn't you already say what you're going to do? And now you want to talk to God about it? So what does the prophet of the Lord tell both of these kings? What needs to happen? You're going to die, Ahab, if you go into battle. You're going to be defeated if you go into this battle. So what does Jehoshaphat do? Well, okay, well, let's go into the battle then. You see, he has one foot on land and one foot in the moving stream. He's going through this rocky patch of his life right now. Okay, I ask you now to turn over to chapter 19 of 2 Chronicles, getting a little closer back to where we are. Also, the first 3 verses there. 2 Chronicles 19, verse 1. Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, thankfully returned in safety after this conflict to his house in Jerusalem. And we studied about that. The reason he returned safely back to his house is on account of his crying out to the Lord for deliverance. He could have been killed himself in the battle. The enemy, the Syrians, were hot on his tail, chasing him, and he cried out to the Lord, okay, I'll help you. And he delivers him, and he lets him come back home by the grace of God. Ahab, as he foretold, does not come back home. He's punished for all of his evil. He dies on the battlefield. So he gets back home safely. Whew, all is good, right? Well, God may have spared your life, but there are consequences to your decision. Excuse me, verse 2. But Jehu, the son of Hanani, the seer, went out to meet him and said to King Jehoshaphat, should you help the wicked and love those who hate the Lord? Because of this, wrath has gone out against you from the Lord. So you have the foot in the moving stream, right? But notice verse 3. Nevertheless, God looks down and he sees that some good is found in you. For you've done some good things. You did destroy the Asherahs out of the land, and you've set your heart to seek the Lord. It's just he's a little divided right now. So one foot in the moving stream and one foot on land. Okay, one more before we get back to our text, and it actually is where we are today, chapter 20. We'll read the end of the chapter, last 3 verses, 35 through 37, and so when we get there, we won't have to reread and go over these. Chapter 20, verse 35. After this, after what? After these events we're discussing today, after the events that took place with his marriage alliance with Ahab, after this Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, joined with Ahaziah, king of Israel. Okay, and we've already covered him. Who's Ahaziah? Well, king of Israel. I got that. Does it help if we go right up here again? Who's Ahaziah? That's the son of Ahab, right? He's undoubtedly the firstborn of Ahab and Jezebel together. And so after he's been reprimanded for having connection to this family and political alliance, after this, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, joined with Ahaziah, king of Israel, who acted wickedly. Has he learned his lesson? Seems to be doing the same thing all over again with Ahab's son. He joined him in building ships to go to Tarshish. You might recall this. And they built the ships in Ezion-Geber. Then Eleazar, the son of Dodavahu, that's always a fun one to me, Dodavahu of Marishah, prophesied against Jehoshaphat, saying, because you have joined with Ahaziah, the Lord will destroy what you have made. And the ships were wrecked and not able to go to Tarshish. Okay, so I say all that to say this, and back in our text of verse 2 in the same chapter, some came and told Jehoshaphat, a great multitude's coming against you from beyond the sea, from Syria. They're actually in Hazazon Tamar, which is in Gedi. I'm going to show you here what he's saying is they're already in your territory. They're in the middle of your country, not like middle. They're in the middle in latitude on the eastern border of your country. Well, I thought God looks out for his own and protects them. And he's made all of these recent religious, political, and societal reforms. He has one foot on solid ground. but he's dangling his other foot still in the moving stream. And God's not content with this. And so it seems that he brings this punishment, this warning on him from at least these three nations we know now, the Ammonites, the Moabites, and the Syrians. They've aligned against him to attack. All right, so we come across this little detail at the end of verse 2. I want to spend just a few minutes on it before we'll need to move on. They are already in Hazazon Tamar, which is En Gedi. Now, I mentioned to you, every now and then I'll be studying these passages. I don't know if you're like this, and oh, that's interesting, and oh, that's cool. Wow, really? And this is one of those moments for me. I really didn't know anything about En Gedi, and I just looked it up, and I was kind of curious. I also find it fascinating that the king of the country wouldn't know in this small territory, a tremendous military, that already there are at least three large nationalities in their militaries that are midway of his country. And this is news to him. He doesn't even recognize. How could they sneak in? Well, it appears that they have come down to the south into the land of the Edomites. That's going to make a lot of sense. I'll show you why here in just a moment. And then they head up to the northwest, and I think they go right along the Dead Sea till they travel up to the midsection of the country on the eastern border of Judah. The reason this has been undetected is because of the territory that they're traveling. This is called the wilderness of Judea. Jesus goes out into the wilderness of Judea to be tempted. David to hide out from the king of Israel back when under the United period, from Saul, who is chasing after him, trying to take his life. You ever seen the wilderness of Judea? I'm going to show it to you. This is one of course, many shots that could be taken. Do you think it's aptly named wilderness? And not all wildernesses or wild places are deserts, but this is one. The classification of a desert is you receive less than 10 inches of rain per year. What do you know about deserts? What's characteristic of a desert that you've seen? What's there an absence of? Obviously water, right? Okay. Everything requires this vital nutrient for survival. Water. If you don't have it, guess what? You don't have a lot of living things that are found there. Not many animals that are located, not much greenery. And you look out, and I know this is just one shot, but there aren't a lot of animals. And how much greenery can you spot in the picture? Okay, so less than 10 inches of rain per year is the classification of a desert. This is one of the driest locations anywhere in the world. I was shocked to find that this area, the wilderness of Judea, receives only about 1.6. It's 1.57 inches of rain annually. So what many of us received last night, it's like, man, that's pretty good. That's what you get in a whole year in that place. And I'm talking hot, arid. Okay. So this place, nobody, nothing pretty much lives there. It's just, it's not going to work out for you. But there's this little place that's called En Gedi, or Hazazon Tamar, isn't it? I think in our text. En Gedi means from Hebrew, fount or fountain of the kid. I don't know the kid part, what the origin of that is, but it makes a lot of sense. Fount or fountain. En Gedi, right along the Dead Sea, is a place where there are 4 sizable freshwater springs. These springs every year produce 1.6, rounding it off, 1.6 billion cubic feet of water. Think about that. And I know, so cubes like this, if that helps any. It's 3-dimensional. And 1.6 billion of those cubes every year in a place that gets no water at all. Now that's pretty cool of itself. But here's what really blew me away. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Really? This is the wow factor. I'm going to show you a few pictures from this place. Look at this. How gorgeous is this? All right, that's just one of the pools that's formed from a spring. Check out that one. Best maybe yet to come. Is that not insane? This is a bucket list thing for me. I want to go to Israel so badly. So my dream is this. If you're going to go and go one time, I mean, you don't want to go for like 2 weeks, right? I would love someday to be able to go for a month. I want to go for a month. I want to spend 2 weeks, and I'd probably like to start in Israel, because that way I could just stay there even more if I needed to. But I'd like to start with Israel, spend 2 weeks in Israel, and then I would like to leave 2 weeks for maybe like trying to go around all the missionary type towns, throughout the Bible lands, and especially in the New Testament. Maybe number one to me would be the Dead Sea. I'm just always been fascinated by the Dead Sea. I want to float in it. I think that would be so cool. This may be my new number one. I want to go to this place. I mean, how unbelievable is that? And look at all the greenery too, comparatively speaking. This is paradise on earth in the middle of complete deadness of the landscape. So that's some interest factor, just once you start digging into something. But now I want to go back to our text and the relevance to what we're discussing. There are 3 nationalities with their armies that have already come into this place, and they're halfway up the territory of Judah on the eastern side of the border. Now, how is it they've been able to sneak in? Do you think there are many people positioned out here watching over this place? Who would travel through that awful location? I tell you who. People perhaps who know what's on the western side of the Dead Sea, about midway up in Gedi. And they've come to this location with the armies, and think about it. You have an abundance of water, everything that you need. You can all group around. Super hot. Jump in and cool off. I mean, you have swimming pools. This is luxury for militaries. And they've all positioned themselves in this spot. But when Jehoshaphat hears this, he's afraid. And we're told this: he set himself to seek the Lord and proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. And I think this is the real plus for Jehoshaphat. You might say, well he does this terrible thing with Ahab. Yeah, God reprimands him and punishes him some. Yeah, that's true. And he saves him, brings him home, and all these good things. And then he starts doing the same thing with his son, Ahaziah, all over. Why does God stick with this guy? I don't think it's because he always does the right thing. That's apparent. But it's because when he does the wrong thing, he always knows where to turn. And he immediately shifts right back to God. And I think there's a lesson that we can take out of that. We have 1 John 1:7, that we should with consistency serve the Lord. And I think you see that. It's borne out in Jehoshaphat's life with consistency. Now, he does some things wrong, some big things, you could say. But when he does it, what does he always do? He turns to the Lord for help. And I know he does repeat a mistake with that same family, but at the same time, he does tend to learn from his mistakes. In the case of Ahaziah, and God destroys the ships, and he says, well, the issue is your sailors. Let me send you my sailors. He said, no, I'm done with that. I'm not playing around with that anymore. God's against it. And so he does have a heart that can be molded, and that's the case here. Jehoshaphat's afraid when he hears of all these countries coming against him, already in his land. They're set up. He's not even prepared for battle like they are. What does he do? He says, guys, we need divine help. And he admits this to his people. Proclaims a fast throughout all Judah. So Judah gathered together to ask help from the Lord. These religious, societal, and political reforms have paid off. The people are ready for this. They're all servants of Yahweh, not of Baal or Asherah or any other false god, the golden calves. Then Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah in Jerusalem, in the house of the Lord, before the new court. And he said, praying to God, O Lord God of our fathers, are you not God in heaven? And do you not rule over all the kingdoms of the nations? And in your hand is there not power and might, so that no one is able to withstand you? Are you not our God, who drove out the inhabitants of this land before your people Israel, and gave it to the descendants of Abraham? This is a beautiful biblical statement. Your friend forever. Whenever you're looking for a favor and you know that the person who can grant you this favor is really tight with somebody else. Never hurts to name drop, right? He's name dropping right here. Remember Abraham, the guy, all these promises were made. You guys were such good friends, and we're his descendants, by the way. And they dwell in it, this territory, and have built you a sanctuary in it for your name. It's your name that's magnified in this land. Saying, if disaster comes upon us, sword, war, what they're facing right here, judgment, punishment for sin. I think that's what they're facing right here as well. Pestilence, disease, famine, food shortage. We will stand before this temple, and in your presence, for your name is in this temple, and cry out to you in our affliction, and you will hear and save. Notice the confidence that he possesses. It's not, you might listen to us and intervene. You will hear when we pray, and you will intervene on our behalf. And now, here are the people of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir. Okay, let's pause. That's a new one that's been brought in. Does anybody know where the Mount of Seir is found? I'll give you a hint. It's not in the territory of any of the peoples we've discussed so far. Well, kind of, but not really. We've really highlighted Moab, Ammon, Judah, Israel, Philistia, Syria. Not located in any of those. I did mention them, but we haven't really talked much about them. It's in the land of Edom. And Mount Seir, very famous, is often used in the Bible interchangeably with the Edomites. So it's Ammon, Moab, and others that come with them. We've been introduced to the one to the northeast. This tells us there's a whole other nationality that's a part of this also, which makes sense because these have all combined to go into the territory of the Edomites and up into the land of Judah. You don't just take an army marching into another nation without permission. They had permission, the Ammonites, the Moabites, and the Syrians, to enter into the land of the Edomites, and it appears then to come up into the territory of Judah. So it is not 3, it is 4 nations that have aligned against Judah. There's a lot of military might here. And now here are the people of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, the Edomites, whom you would not let Israel invade when they came out of the land of Egypt. But they turned from them and did not destroy them. Let me see where we are. Yeah, we won't turn to and read about that to refresh. But if you're interested, Numbers 20, 14 through 21. Numbers 20, 14 through 21 will refresh you on that account. The short of it is this. The Israelites, they've come out of Egyptian captivity. And, of course, they've wandered in the wilderness. They're coming up this area, and they need to go up the eastern side of the Jordan River. And the Edomites, of course, that goes back to their descendants of Esau. So Jacob and Esau, these are cousins of theirs. And they ask for permission and tell them what's been going on in their lives, the catch up. And they say, look, all we need to do, God's blessed us. He's told us to do this. All we need to do is come up your territory. We won't use your wells. We won't harm you in any way. Anything's taken or harmed, we'll make sure to more than restore it to you, but no one's going to do that. We're just going to keep along the highway. They said, you will not come into our territory. In fact, they sent an armed guard, their military, out to make sure that doesn't happen. And God lets them know, hey, don't attack them. I know this isn't a friendly move, but they are your family. And he lets them know the time will come for retribution, but the time is not right now. Well, the time for retribution is coming right here. He says, God, remember whenever you wouldn't let us attack the Edomites? They're still around because of that, and now they're coming to attack us. Do you remember that? Verse 11, here they are rewarding us by coming to throw us out of your possession, which you have given us to inherit. And who would like to do our memory verse in number 12? 2 Chronicles 20, the 12th verse. Roy, please. Very good, Roy. You ever feel that way about our nation or about our world? Here I am, one person and limited with my voice, whatever. I mean, really, what can I do? Even as a group, what can we do against and by no means will we become militant. I'm not encouraging that at all. But against, the powerful militaries, what do we do? What can we do? Oh, is this not a wonderful verse? It reminds me, Roy, exactly what we need to do. Individually and collectively. To be humble and honest enough just to speak it out loud. That's what it is. We have no power. We can't, I'm not saying there isn't anything that we can do at all, But my point is, compared to the power that we see in the world, really, what can we do against that? Exactly what Jehoshaphat did. To humbly and confidently admit with a smile on our face, we have no power. We should be excited that it's that way. Because when we are powerless, the all-powerful is willing to kick in and to do for us. And we just need to admit that. God, what do I do? What do? We're powerless. We don't know what to do, but we know where to turn. And we have confidence, even though we don't know what you're going to do or how you're going to do it, in some way you're going to do what needs to be done. One of my favorite scriptures in all of the inspired writings. Don't know what to do. We're powerless. What should we do? I know what to do. I'm turning my eyes heavenward. Powerful stuff. Verse 13. Now all Judah with their little ones, their wives, and their children stood before the Lord. I think it makes a difference when one person does that. In James 5, one person has great power as it's working. But when all of God's people, bless you, both genders, all colors, all ethnicities, and all age groups get together and unite with this request before God, don't you know it makes a difference? Then, I don't know if this means like this. It seems like from the setting probably so. It's like immediately. Bless you again. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Jehaziel, the son of Zechariah, the son of Benaiah, the son of Jeiel, the son of Mattaniah. I think this guy's got some lineage. A Levite of the sons of Asaph in the midst of the assembly. And he said, listen, all of you Judah, and you inhabitants of Jerusalem, and you, King Jehoshaphat, thus says the Lord to you, do not be afraid nor dismayed because of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God's. That's exactly what they've been saying. You are powerless. You can do nothing, so don't be afraid. Well, that doesn't make sense. That's the way we should want it. You recall Paul and his problem in the body, his weakness. He calls it his thorn in the flesh, and he begged God, I need this weakness removed from me. He said, no, you don't. You need the weakness. You need the problems, because that's when I get involved. And then you have my power on your side. And that's so much greater than a healthy you all day long. It's so much greater than a smart us all day long. It's so much better than a powerful military us. And I'm not saying a nation shouldn't seek to have a powerful military. The point of which is this. It's a beautiful thing to belong to God and to be weak and indefensible. Because when we admit that before God and we ask for help, that's when His power sets in. He says, you are powerless, you don't have the smarts. This is beautiful. This is good for you. That means the battle is not yours, but it's God's. Tomorrow go up against them. They will surely come up by the ascent of Ziz, and you will find them at the end of the brook before the wilderness of Jeruel. And I'll switch back to the other map and give a little bit of scope here. The wilderness of Jeruel, it's right in this area, just up to the northwest, maybe about 10 miles. You will not need, listen to this instruction, verse 17. You will not need to fight in this battle. It's 4 nations against 1. And he says, you're going to win, and the cool thing about it is you don't even have to fight to win. What? This is insane. Position yourselves, stand still, or do nothing other than position yourselves, and see the salvation of the Lord who is with you, O Judah and Jerusalem. Do not fear or be dismayed. Tomorrow go out against them, for the Lord is with you. And the king bowed his head in the presence of his nation with his face to the ground. You ever seen a leader of a country in our time do that? To bow his head to the God of heaven and a great multitude, no fear at all, before the whole nation. Notice all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem followed him, bowed before the Lord, worshiping the Lord. Then the Levites of the children of the Kohathites and of the children of the Korahites stood up to praise the Lord God of Israel with voices loud and high, saying praises to him. So they rose early in the morning and went out to the wilderness of Tekoa. That's right around that's the same thing as the desert of Tekoa. You can see in the tan bubble there. And as they went out, Jehoshaphat stood and said, hear me, O Judah, and you inhabitants of Jerusalem. Believe in the Lord your God. Notice it's not, follow me and I'll lead you. It's, hey, follow the Lord and his instructions for the battle. He's the commander of the army, not I. Believe in the Lord your God, and you shall be established. Believe his prophets, and you shall prosper. And when they consulted with the people, he appointed those who should sing to the Lord, who should praise the beauty of holiness. And they went out before the army, and they were saying or singing, praise the Lord, for his mercy endures forever. Isn't this kind of a weird scene? I mean, you're going out what should be just this mass slaughter, one nation before four, and they just march out confidently. And by the way, we have a song we've recently been learning of how my weapon is a melody. That's it right here. Their weapon is a melody. They're just singing praises to their God. That's strange on the battlefield. Now, when they began to sing and praise, the Lord acts. He sets ambushes against the people of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, the Edomites who had come against Judah, and they were defeated. I wish I could go into great detail about what all this involves. We don't know really a lot about it. But this much we do. Verse 23, for the people of Ammon and Moab stood up against the inhabitants of Mount Seir. All of a sudden, these two nations unite to attack one of their allies. I don't know if somebody did something, said something about somebody's mama, or, but, I mean, it's on between the allies at this point. So the Ammonites and the Moabites, they destroy the Edomites, they kill them, and when they had made an end to the inhabitants of Seir, apparently they get angry with one another too. We don't know the details of it, but they help to destroy one another. So when Judah came to a place, remember, they haven't even fired a shot. They just showed up for battle, like God said, and they sang praises, and God says, all right, here we go. And he fights the battle for them. When Judah came to a place overlooking the wilderness, they looked toward the multitude, and there were their dead bodies, fallen on the earth. No one had escaped. I don't know if it even gets to a situation where there are quite literally two guys left. One of Moab and one of Ammon, and they simultaneously stab each other. Nobody is left as a survivor. You can make no sense of this at all. All three armies have been completely wiped out on the battlefield. Judah hasn't even been involved other than showing up and singing worship songs. When Jehoshaphat and his people came to take away their spoil, they found among them an abundance of valuables on the dead bodies and precious jewelry. How dumb is that? I mean, as far as if you're going to battle in three nations, why would you carry all your valuables into battle? I wonder if it goes back to some kind of confusion that God placed on their minds, just so his people could take everything from them easily. More than they could carry away. They didn't spend a single day in battle other than showing up and singing, but it did take 3 days to gather all the spoil from all the carcasses. And on the fourth day they assembled in the valley of Barakah, for there they blessed the Lord. Therefore the name of that place is called this until this day. They returned, every man of Judah and Jerusalem with Jehoshaphat in front of them, to go back to Jerusalem with joy, for the Lord had made them rejoice over their enemies. So they came to Jerusalem with stringed instruments, harps, trumpets, to the house of the Lord, the temple. And the fear of God was on all the kingdoms of those countries when they heard that the Lord had fought against the enemies of Israel. Then the realm of Jehoshaphat was quiet, for as God gave him rest all around. I think what he's done here is he's given the king a clean slate. I think he sent him a warning shot, and he handles it the right way. He reforms. He admits his wrongdoing and goes back. And again, this isn't a guy who's completely rotten. I mean, this has been a tremendous servant of the Lord and just constant ascension, who goes through a rocky patch and a little bit of a valley in his life. But it seems like he comes out of it ever so strong. And everybody's taking note around. You don't find enemies just traipsing into the country of Jehoshaphat any longer. As I was reading on this and doing some reflection, it reminds me of our own country, our nation's history. And we know, that, of course, the revolution, what led to it in America, declaring her independence and attempting ever so peaceably and respectfully to do so. And then the then seen invading nation or remaining nation of the British looked at as an act of treason and war. And of course, we know the 8-year conflict that resulted from that. America had no sense winning that war. I've looked at it a number of times. It just does not add up. They were going against the most powerful military in the world. We really weren't even a people. Really, I mean, technically, we had just formed a nation officially at that time. We didn't even know what we were doing hardly in that nation. I don't know of any way of explaining it other than the colonists and the new country's reliance on God and answered prayer to win the conflict. That's the only thing that makes any sense to me. But have you ever thought about how long it took? And I know there are some other skirmishes and technically even some wars along the way. But you know how long it took before a foreign enemy really in a serious way in a major war attempted to invade America again? About 150 years down the road in World War II. And that didn't end very well for the enemy either, did it? It doesn't go for 150 years, but people have learned their lesson. We don't just want to traipse into that country with our military any longer because we know the God that fights behind that nation. I hope as a nation we'll remember what's made us strong through the years. The heavy reliance on God, and especially in military conflict. Nations around the world take notice, and they fear. And you can make arguments about military, this and that. And they fear the God of Scripture when they see the blessing of Him behind His people. We'll end there. Any other thoughts on 2 Chronicles 20, what we've covered today? I love that memory verse, don't you? We have no power at all. We don't know, but we know who you are, and our eyes are upon you. Yes, Rebecca? Yeah, I agree with you. He'd prepared the nation for it. And again, that's the positive side to him. I mean, there's a good side to him, even though he had his weaknesses at times. Yeah, good. Yeah. Whew. It's like a peach seed, It's pretty good size, if you ask me. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Rebecca, for that. Next time, chapter 21 of Chronicles, we're going to stay in that. The last verse, number 20, that's kind of a unique one we'll do as memory work, 2 Chronicles 21:20. I would also recommend as reading, it's up to you if you want to do it, 2 Kings 8:16 through 24. We'll cover that too, 2 Kings 8:16 through 24. The Chronicles is more detail. So, all right, thank you.